Taoiseach, you say that you have lots of other more important issues to deal with, but you are the Taoiseach and you cannot dictate to the opposition what questions we ask. Yesterday, you told the Dáil that there were 29 nominees to the Seanad vacancy, for which you interviewed Mr John McNulty. Now, was he the only Fine Gael nominee that you interviewed? Yesterday, you said that during the course of the validation and eligibility process, Mr McNulty expressed a desire to serve on a cultural body. Today, you say he did not raise this with you. So who did he express that desire to? Can you tell the Dáil who forwarded Mr McNulty's CV to Minister Humphries? Was anyone else's CV forwarded to her? Who authorised the sending of Mr McNulty's CV to the Minister? You say that Minister Humphries appointed Mr McNulty to the board of the Irish Museum of Modern Art in her own right. In other words, you imply that this was nothing to do with you, that there were two separate processes. But the government quota of 9 nominees to the board was already filled. So these nominees that the Minister was about to make breached the government ceiling. Now, I note the absence of Labour ministers here, again. Was the Labour leader consulted? Was the Taoiseach consulted on this? You also say that you accept responsibility for the Fine Gael party officials bringing Mr McNulty's interest in serving on a state board to the attention of a minister. But you say this was nothing to do with you, that this was a separate process. So, if it was nothing to do with you, how are you responsible?
Come out.
Two ways. First of all, as the leader of the Fine Gael party, and secondly as Taoiseach. In respect of the Fine Gael party, I have already pointed out that the system that the party had in place internally was not followed through. I note reports today in some of the papers that, for instance, members of the Executive Council of Fine Gael were disappointed that the perception was that they were being blamed here. The fact of the matter is that after the European elections, when Senator Clune was elected to the European Parliament, that a vacancy arose in the Seanad. The subcommittee of the Executive Council considered the position. There were 44 nominations, 29 names submitted, and the Executive Council made 2 recommendations. Subsequently, Deputy McGinley said he was going to retire. I'd left a vacancy for a major political representative in half of Donegal. I looked at Mr McNulty's credentials, and I said this is a candidate who would fit the bill in terms of work in the Seanad. I discussed the Seanad and its workings and political agendas with him. We never discussed anything about cultural boards. In the course of the validation process and preparing those criteria, the Fine Gael personnel did not go back to the Executive Council, and I was upset about that because it was set up for that purpose. So I accepted responsibility for that flaw in that system. I'm rectifying that. And in a broader sense, as I said to Deputy Martin, what I want to do now is move on as part of the reform agenda carried out by the government already, in terms of corporate donations, gender balance, gender quotas, the freedom of information, all of these issues that have been dealt with. Here is another major piece of political reform that needs to be dealt with in everybody's interests, because there are very good people out there who will not serve on public bodies or on boards in any circumstances because of the likelihood that they might be pilloried as being, associates of political parties or cronies or whatever else. And that's why an external independent validation of all of these is necessary. You make the point, Deputy Adams, that Minister Humphries breached the ceiling in terms of the numbers of personnel serving on the state boards. In the case of these, government did make a commitment which has not been followed through fully, that boards would be reduced from 15 down to 9. Now that hasn't been followed through because many of the cultural institutions themselves fought very valiantly for the retention of their independence, and some of them were quite vociferous about that. Obviously, the National Concert Hall bill is on the A list for determination during this session. So there were 6 vacancies actually on the board of IMMA, and the Minister chose to make 2 appointments and made them in her own right right as Minister, based on the credentials of the candidates. She does not have to inform me of every appointment that's made to every board. In the case of chairman of boards, as you know, government changed the rules, and the chairman have to come before the relevant Oireachtas committee to see what it is that they bring to the exercise. So I am not informed of every individual appointment that's made for non-remunerated positions on state boards, where there are thousands of positions to be filled over the years. So from now on, all of that process is removed from the politics and politicians. They'll all be publicly advertised, all be externally verified, and every minister will set out. Well, I could say some things, Micheál, but I won't. Every minister will set out the criteria, the qualifications, the skills that are necessary to serve on all of the boards under their responsibility. That will all be up on stateboard.ie, and the members of the public will have full transparency and full accountability there. And every person appointed then has to be independently assessed outside and verified. And separate from that, as I said yesterday, on the commercial semi-states where there are particular skill sets required. For instance, in the area of New Era, dealing with Arvia, Bord Gash and Bord and so on, consultations with New Era will set out what are the specific skill sets: accountancy, legal qualifications, data management, or whatever, business acumen. All of these things are then set out, and in consultation, those very specialised appointments are made following that. This is a major change in the entire system. And what I want to see, Deputy Adams, out of all of that, is that state board service and public duty service should not be seen to be in any way reproachable. In other words, that it should be entirely above reproach, and I hope to oversee that with the decision that the government made yesterday.
Thank you. Deputy Gerry Adams, supplementary.
Taoiseach, very often when you're asked a question here, you respond by saying, this is a very complex issue. As if it was beyond the comprehension of us mere mortals on this side of the Dáil. So I'm trying to keep this simple. I asked you a series of quite straightforward questions which you ignored completely. Was Mr John McNulty the only Fine Gael nominee you interviewed? Please answer that question. You say he expressed his desire to serve on a cultural body, but today you said he did not raise this with you. I'm repeating my question again. Who did he express that desire to? You're bound to have checked this out. You're bound to have asked someone. Can you tell the Dáil? Paddy wants to know, Taoiseach. Patricia wants to know, Taoiseach. Can you tell the Dáil also who forwarded Mr McNulty's CV to Minister Humphries? Who authorised this? Was anyone else's CV forwarded to her? And then you say, in response to my earlier question, and I didn't ask this question, that you decided that, I paraphrase what you said, that Mr McNulty would be a good candidate for the nomination for the Seanad vacancy. Now, did you decide this before Minister Humphries received the proposition that Mr McNulty should be nominated to the board of IMMA? And here's the crux. Who recommended to the Minister that Mr McNulty should be nominated to the board of IMMA?
Well, it's not a complex issue, as you say. No, John McNulty was not the only person I interviewed. Some of these 29 approached me themselves, and I spoke to them about their views as to whether they might be considered or not. But John McNulty was one whom I gave a lengthy interview to because of the fact that Deputy McGinley had retired, announced his retirement, and in his case, but you see, it's not complex. The Fine Gael party set up a structure within our own executive council of a subcommittee dealing with all of the names that are there, all of the names, and they prepare a case to say these are candidates that we think are very good. And they did that. My point in answering questions here yesterday was that after I spoke to John McNulty, the process kicks in for validation within that structure. And that Executive Council were not reported to, or were not informed, nor was I. Now, yes, of course, I said he was a good candidate, and he is a good candidate, and I've heard him speak since. Now, in respect of, yes, it was obvious that he was one of a number of names being considered for nomination to the Senate when he would have been appointed to the board of IMMA, if you let me answer. And as I said to you, he himself said this morning he did not know that he was going to be the candidate when he was appointed to IMMA, and appointed so by the Minister for Arts in her own right as Minister. And the CV was prepared, of course, by Fine Gael personnel in Fine Gael headquarters and forwarded to the Minister, by Fine Gael personnel in Fine Gael headquarters. The point I'm making to you is, that it is very simple, and it's also simple to me, in that the system that was in place was flawed and hasn't worked, and I've changed that, and we're moving on to a much broader reform policy here to deal with all of the public appointments, and indeed some of the people on the Fianna Fáil side, who approached me in the last 3 months about personnel whom they wanted appointed to various boards. Maybe you might reflect on what's happening over there as well. So the point is, system flawed. I've accepted responsibility. On my watch, standards slipped. I was unhappy about that. John McNulty spoke out himself very clearly and very cogently about this yesterday. The point is fixing that internally, and that's a matter of Fine Gael. In the broader sense for the country, we're moving on to a big reform programme here, but we will put an end to the flawed system which allowed for people who want to give public service as electors and as cronies. And I say that, if you want to debate on this sometime, at the end, we'll give it to you.
I'm taken to a point of order now, Consolia. I asked the Taoiseach very directly, very straightforward questions on 3 occasions, and he has failed or refused to answer them. And I put it again: who sent Mr McNulty CV to the Minister, and who authorised it?
I'm sorry, that's not a point of order. No, it's not a point of order. It's not a point of order.
Yeah, I won't answer the question.
But I just repeat again. It's not a point of order.
Can't hear you.
It's not a point of order.
Can't hear you.
And I'm not responsible for questions that Taoiseachs or ministers give.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
No, it's not a point of order. Sorry, I'll have to ask you to resume your seat, Deputy.
Deputy
Collins.
You're
no. Taoiseach, Deputy John Collins. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. No. I'm hearing no more points of order. I'm not. Look, Deputy. Well, I'm sorry.